Okay, today what we are going to see is about the task flow. It's very important topic to cover because task flow is one of the feature which you will be extensively using in any application you develop, because it's one of the biggest advantage of using ADF. In OAF world, we used to use a lot of used to write a lot of code just for navigation purpose only. But here the navigation rule can be configured visually, and the task flows are very powerful so that you can avoid a lot of code as well. So let's try to create a one task flow page, and we'll use the same logic like what we used to create the master page. On the left hand side we had the search, on the right hand side we had the detail page in case of the master page. But in case of task flow, we'll have a separate search page, and then we will have a separate detail page, and we will combine them together using the unbounded task flow. There are two kinds of task flows in ADF. One is unbounded task flow, the other one is bounded task flow. The unbounded task flow is like an entry point to the application. It can be used to configure menus, all those stuff. And the bounded task flow, it's a self-contained task flow. It has a definite starting point, and it can have one or more or no exit points. And most of the application in ADF are done using the bounded task flows. And the every application you create in ADF, you'll have one unbounded task flow. Of course, you can create more than one unbounded task flow as well, but the general practice is to use one unbounded task flow as an entry point to the application. Let us see a quick comparison. Let me check where it is, the task flows. Yeah, task flows. Okay, so as I told you, we have two kinds of task flows: unbounded task flow and bounded task flow, and then we'll compare them as well. So ADF task flows are the logical units of page flows that can break application into series of tasks with a shared memory scope. It's very important to start right in ADF, because refactoring is a difficult task compared to building it for the first time. So you have to come up with an architectural pattern, all those things, which we'll discuss in the subsequent sessions, where we'll break the application into different modules, and different modules will have its own application, and it will have the combination of all bounded task flows. Then you can drag and drop those bounded task flows into wherever you want, or if it's a page fragment. If it is a page-based task flow, you can just call the URL or call the another bounded task flows through the navigation rule. This is a perfect structure of an unbounded task flow. You see, the entry point is a wildcard entry, and most of the times you will see this global navigation options available in the page, right? The home, preferences, profile, all those stuff. So it can enter from any page. That's what we are saying. This is a wildcard entry. So once you configure like this navigation rule, whatever you specify here, will be applicable for the entire pages in the application. So you can go to sales order page, and from there, if you want to go to home page, you can do so. Instead of configuring in each and every page, since it's a global navigation rule in the unbounded task flow, you can refer this value in the actions property of any button or link you create in any page you want. So it provides a wildcard entry. Also, from the unbounded task flow, you can call another bounded task flow. This is the create, update, employee BTF we are calling, which is nothing but a bounded task flow. You can drag and drop this bounded task flow into this unbounded task flow, and you can call that using manage employees rule. Once you enable this manage employees rule, then in your page, say for example this employees page, the actions button will have the manage employees link. Once you select that, then this navigation rule will be applied. The bounded task flow, a typical example of a bounded task flow with one entry point, which is the default activity, and then it can have more than one exit point, or it doesn't have an exit point. So in this case of bounded task flow, this is a create edit bounded task flow. Here we can update or edit, update or create a new employee. That is based on the parameter what we pass to this router. This router takes the value, the parameter value, and then it checks some condition and then decides it's a create route or an update route. If it is a create route, it calls the create insert and then goes to the same page. And in case of update, it sets the current row with the key and then it goes to the employee page. So what is the difference is it's the same page, but when it is a router decides whether it is a create, it will go in the create mode so that you can create a new record, or you have to pass the value of the key. That's nothing but, for example, employee ID is 1, employee ID 2, all those things. If you pass employee ID 2, the employee ID 2 will be queried and it will be ready for update in the employee. Here you can decide whether you want to save or cancel. If you do a save, it will commit the record and come back out of the task flow on a task flow. If you cancel, it will roll back or issue the rollback, and then it comes back to the previous screen. So this is a self-contained unit. If you've seen, there is a single point of entry. This router is nothing but the single point of entry, and from there it does few operations, and then it comes back using the save or cancel. Either you can save or cancel, because this task flow is starting a new transaction. When you start a new transaction, you have to make sure that you're committing the transaction or rollbacking transaction at the end of the transaction. You cannot just exit. The bounded task flow has a definite entry point, and then here in this case it has a definite exit point, and it also has more than one exit points. We'll see each one by one, like what is a view activity. The view activity can be a page or page fragment. The difference is, if you have a page, you can just call this page. In case of page fragment, you can drag and drop to any page you want. For example, the features like attachments, which is reusable feature, and contacts, and then call logs, all these things are used across the application. In those cases, you will be just dragging and dropping the page fragment, the task flow based page fragment into the page, and you can reuse the functionality. Say if you have hundreds of 200 pages in your application, you don't have to develop this feature every time. Instead, you do it once as a bounded task flow page fragment, and you can drag and drop to any page you want and parameterize these page fragments so that it takes the right values of the base page. That is, for example, the object ID, object type. The object ID can be like your for example, campaign lead or list in CRM, or it can be a sales order or a PO in the ERP system. So you can just pass the value of the base page, and then based on that, it will query the information as well as create new transaction for the attachments. That's how EBS does it. The same concept you can apply here in the ADF task flow as well. In the router activity, it evaluates an expression. The expression can be based on a parameter which is passed to the task flow. Based on that, it can decide it's a create or edit route. And the method call, it can be any Java method, or it can be an operation binding like the create insert or set current row with key value. You can just drag and drop this method call into the task flow, and there you can decide which whether it's a custom function or a custom default operation available. So right now at this moment of time, just remember these things, and then we will do a practical example. Then you can practice that as well. You have to practice at this at least 5 times this example, so that you are comfortable with this, because you will be doing again and again in your application, because this is the maximum number of pages you will be creating with the same concept. And you can, of course, you can call another bounded task flow inside a task flow. So it can be recursive or it can be continuous with the different calls made in the task flow. And the task flow return activity is to decide when to exit the task flow. And when you start a new transaction, you can exit with a task flow return activity, but you need to compulsorily issue a commit or rollback. If you don't start a transaction, you can just simply exit the task flow using the task flow return activity. This is for a save point. For example, if you are filling up a huge form and it has 5 steps, that's the train stops, and you have filled up 2 steps, and suddenly the third step you lose the internet or something like that. In that case, you don't have to start from scratch. When you actually restart, all the things which you have filled up in the first two train stops will be available. You can continue with the third stop. You don't have to again start from scratch. This feature is available in save point restore functionality. You can save for later. And the URL view activity is something like you can call an external application like www.oracle.com. If you want to call from your application, you can use the URL view activity, which will act like an iframe to show the information of oracle.com in your application. Let us compare what is a bounded task flow and an unbounded task flow. The unbounded task flow is, it doesn't have a well-defined boundary. As I told you, you can if you have a wildcard entry point, you can call that navigation rule across any page in your application. So it doesn't have a boundary, well-defined boundary, and also it doesn't have a single point of entry. If you see the home profile preferences, it can be entered from any page, and the navigation rule is like wildcard entry to the home page. But in case of bounded task flow, if you really notice, it has a definite start point. That is, this green background indicates that this is a default activity. Whenever this bounded task flow is called from any an unbounded task flow or a bounded task flow, or if it is embedded into another page fragment, the default activity is the first one which is being called. So it has a definite entry point. Okay, it can have 0 or more exit points. Yeah. Any queries?
Sudhakar, yes, just like for bounded task flow, we have many examples like purchase orders, sales orders.
Right.
And for unbounded task flow, is there any real-time example?
That's what
From
I've shown here. Like for example, you can call the home preferences profile, which is available in the global navigation area. No, if you open any application,
okay,
you will see
yes, yes.
that the home preferences, all those things. You
Okay,
can
multiple fields. Means
yeah,
in the navigation home page, we have these certain
yes,
fields, links,
yeah,
functions. Okay,
yeah. These
okay.
functions are available across the application. From any page, you can
Yes.
just click home, it will come. That's because this wildcard rule is there, right? So it will give you the option to call that navigation rule from any page you want. So classic case is this unbounded task flow. The unbounded task flow, if you right click and you can create as a menu entry, then you can use that menu entry to create the menus on the page. Like it can be home, preferences, profile, employees, or it can be a drop down as well. That's the major purpose of using a unbounded task flow. But there will be hundreds of bounded task flows in the application. There will be at least one unbounded task flow. Whenever you create an application, it automatically creates this unbounded task flow, one unbounded task flow in the application. I'll show you in the JDeveloper where it creates and how to use that. And you cannot parameterize the unbounded task flow. But in case of bounded task flow, you can have both input and output parameters. It can be bookmarked. If you are on a page accessed through unbounded task flow, you can bookmark for a future entry. But bounded task flow, it has a definite start point and definite one or more exit points, so it cannot be bookmarked. And you cannot manage transaction. You can just navigate. For example, home preferences, all those things. You cannot manage any transaction on that. You can simply just go to that page. That's the objective of using a unbounded task flow. Mostly it acts like a it acts like a an entry point into the application rather than managing some transaction. And the bounded task flow, it can manage transaction. It can be used to manage existing transaction, or it can be used for starting a new transaction. And the unbounded task flow, you cannot call an unbounded task flow from another task flow. But bounded task flow, it can be invoked from an unbounded task flow, or it can be invoked from a page as a page fragment, or it can be invoked from another bounded task flow. So it becomes completely reusable functionality, and also it's widely used as well. So the understanding the concept that a bounded task flow can be reused across the application by just making a task flow call, or it can be a page fragment which can be dragged into another page. or it can be a bounded task flow which can be called from another unbounded task flow. And the bounded task flow, as I told you, it cannot be used as a region in the page, but in case of bounded task flow, we can use it as a region in a page with the page fragments. Let us quickly create this application, which will have manage employees page as well as the search employees page. The search employees page we will drag and drop to the unbounded task flow, and from there we will call an bounded task flow, which is the create edit task flow, so that we know the difference between what is the unbounded task flow and bounded task flow. How it can work together also we can understand.